Hey guys, Caleb here, back again with more Red Knot. This time we are going to read a book called Shadowfall, Book 1 of the Godslayer Chronicles by James Clemens. Now, I'm gonna fess up here, I have actually read most of the first 3 chapters of this book. I started this book on my own. I kept reading until about page 50, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm gonna do a Red Knot. I picked this up, first of all, because the cover looks cool. Basically, it's like this shadowy lizard-looking dude over what's supposed to be a goddess. So, let's actually, let me open this. This is the hardback from James Clemens, whose wit-itch novels have been compared to the fantasies of Guy Garville Kay and George R.R. Martin. Comes the first novel in a new series about a world where mysterious gods hold powerful secrets, knights walk in the shadows, and daemons claw up from the darkness. 4 millennia have passed since the 100 immortal gods came to Myrelia. Out of the chaos they created the 9 lands, blessed with their graces, and protected from the nightmarish hinterlands, where rogue gods stalk across a barbarous wilderness. In all this time, nothing has disturbed the peace of the 9 lands. Until now, for the impossible, the unthinkable has happened. Mirren, goddess of the Simmering Isles, has been murdered. The only witness was Taylor D. Nock, a chipled and disgraced former Shadow Knight, who lives in agonizing shame of his past. He saw the dark entity that killed Mirren, and as he held the dying goddess, her last breath bestowed a powerful blessing on him, a mark that healed his broken body, a mark that many see as proof that he killed a god, a mark that unleashed a powerful force of darkness within him. Chased across Myrelia by enemies both human and ethereal, aided only by outcasts like himself, Tyler must uncover and face down a being powerful enough to kill an immortal, the true Godslayer. If he fails, all of Myrelia will fall into shadow. So that sounds fantastic, doesn't it? That's why I picked up the book. I'm like, hey, this sounds pretty awesome. So let's read about the author, shall we? James Clemens was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1961 and raised in the Midwest in rural Canada. He attended the University of Missouri and graduated with a doctorate in veterinary medicine. In 1985, the lure of ocean, sun, and new horizons eventually drew him to the West Coast, where he established his veterinary practice in Sacramento, California. He is the author of the acclaimed witch fantasy novels and of the national bestseller Subterranean, published under the name James Rollins. Keep in mind that the little author blurb mentioned nothing about this guy having anything to do with England. Keep that in mind, nothing to do with England, he's American. And keep in mind the premise of the story. What's the back blurbs here? They're supposed to talk about how good this book is. Praise for the enthralling fantasy of James Clemens. Grabs at your heart and tears a little hole, then tears another and another. A brutal and beautiful ride. I can't put the book down. Well, we got the first part correct, by A.R. Salvatore. I loved every page. Clemens has constructed a world of magic that's never been seen before. We'll get to that. With a cast of beings who are engaging and enticing that You never want the story to end. John Saul. I will so disagree with that. Clemens demonstrates considerable skill at combing swift pacing with character development. Library Journal. Oh, character development. Once we hit page 30, I'm not going to be laughing. Fresh, sparky details and enough plot convolutions to keep fans coming back for more. Kirkus Reviews. I think all these people were pretty much paid a shit ton of money just to write a small blurb of bullshit. I'm already going to spoil some things for you. I don't like this story. I don't like it at all. If this sounds intriguing to you, good for you. Go pick it up. But my personal recommendation is not to. Dedication page, acknowledgements page, and a bunch of squiggly lines, which apparently translates to, "The way is open to all who seek power. The low road ends at one's heels, and the blood-red path lined with bones and petals lies at one's toes, alone. This is the path one must walk, but not the only way. The last spoken words of the tongueless god." Some more squiggly lines. All shite stinks, but from it blooms the most fragrant roses. An unsubstantiated proverb from a rogue god. Okay, we got a map. In darkness. It glides, a shadow seeking the light. Its true name cannot be spoken with the logic of flesh and breath. It is no more than a trembling dark vibration along the plain that lies beneath rock and storm. It has no form, no shape, no substance. Neithrin. I'm so gonna have trouble pronouncing some of this more elaborate shit. Neithrin. That is its being, but not its name. It is a creature of the nether, that vast and empty void. It glides up to one of those rare places where its existence overlaps into the world of substance. Few know of these Maionti points, but they exist. Just as the sea rides up onto the rocky shore, so do the tides of the nether roll against the world above. The Neithrin finds a hidden insunerary, an opening where its world and the upper world blend and shift. Rising, it swims up a choked channel, silty with substance, into the world above. Abandoning the nether far below, it enters the depths of the Black Sea, birthing into the icy waters. Light never reaches these depths. Here is eternal darkness, blurring where one world ends and another begins. But the Neithrin knows its way. It's been told, instructed, willed. The shadow creature rises through the cold, dark sea. It shudders and gains form, drawing bits of luminescent life from the ocean. The depths are small, but they thrum through its being vibrations of pleasure. It sails upwards. More and more life is drawn. Substance builds layer by layer, like barnacles on a ship's keel. Form and shape bloom out of nothingness. Pressure lifts as aquamarine moonlight bleeds down, bathing the nether creature's new form. As it nears the surface, schooled fish flee in clouds of scale. Even a monstrous real shark flicks its muscular tail and vanishes. Unconcerned, it allows them to escape. It has all the structure it needs for this world. It tests its black limbs, its long snaking tail. My nose. Its long snaking tail, and swims upward out of the dark womb. At last the Neithrin breaks the waves with a crested head and breathes the night's salt-soaked air, testing its lungs. Lidless eyes shine with a light that does not belong to this world. It stares across the foam-limbed waves toward the distant shore. Islands breach the waves, shoals, reefs, atolls, volcanic peaks, an archipelago, the simmering isles. A hiss escapes the broken fish bones that make up its teeth. It swims towards its destination, the largest island of the archipelago. Eyes reflect the flickering lights that sparkle from the isle's crowned peak and spill down its slopes into the sea, describing homes, streets, and ramparts. A few lamps even skip out into the waters, marking moored fishcraft and masted deep whalers. The Netherine ignores all, knowing its purpose. As it crosses the ring of reefs, none note its undulating passage. Even the lesser moon hides her face behind fog and cloud. The Netherine moves through the sea-water as easily as though the insubstantial reality of its home. Land rises beneath the waves. The Netherine resists touching such solidness, gliding through the shallows, remaining in water for as long as possible. But soon, force and blood and promise drive it from the waves. Clawed feet dig into the sand. Climbing upright, it balances with a long tail. Though it wears flesh and bone, edges blur with the shadows of the dark beach. It does not belong there. It steps forward. It must. Water sulces from the assassin's shoulders as it lurches forward. Steam rises from its scales. Claws drip with more than water. It moves across the sand, turning each step to molten glass behind it. It has come here to slay a god. Well, as a prologue, I'm assuming that is. That's not bad world building. A little redundancy at the end, as we're already told it has a tail and it's made up of, sea life it killed and consumed into itself. We're quite aware it's not of this world. You've quite well established that within the first paragraph or so before I turn the page. But right now it seems okay. It seems. Trust me, it's going to get a lot worse. And then I'm just going to get mad. First, fall from grace. Hu mor, in, which is a noun. I don't know why I said in. Litic, some scribbles. To be moist. 1. Any functional fluid of an animal. 2. One of the quadruples of greater bodily fluids. Blood, sweat, masculine seed, feminine menses. Or quintangle of lesser bodily fluids. Tears, saliva, velogum, yellow and black bile. 3. The blessed fluids from which flow the 9 graces of gods. Annals of Physique Primer and 3593. Do you see where this is going with that little description? Chapter 1. Punt. Some nights simply never end. Tyler Denock rolled to one knee atop the broken cobble and wiped blood from the scrub of dark beard under his chin. A moment ago, tossed out of the wooden frog, he had landed hard on an arm that was more club than limb. His support had given way, slamming him face down on the unforgiving street. As he kissed the stones, he was reminded of an old adage. As he kissed the stones, he was reminded of an old adage concerning the Summering Isles. A good night can last forever, but a bad night lasts even longer. On his knees now, Tyler prayed for this particular evening to end. Forget raising a pint and acknowledging, if only to himself, the 30th pass of his birth year. He wished only for his lone bed in the garret over the fishmonger's shop. But that was not to be. He would be lucky to see sunrise. Tasting blood from his split lip, he swept his gaze right and left as he sought any means of escape. Up street spread the terraces, palacios, and gardened heights of those with enough wealth to enjoy the cooler breezes of the isle's cliffs, leading up at last to the white castellation that blazed atop the summer mount. Guarded heavily, there would be no escape in that direction. Nor down street. That direction led to the crooked alleyways, horrid corners, and dark narrows of Lower Punt. Safety never lay in that direction. So, trapped in the middle, he faced his adversaries, Bargo and Yorga. The pair of bulky eye-men bore matching tattoos on their shoulders, two halves of the same slave ring. Once bonded and linked combatants in the blood circuses, they were now freemen. My nose is so itchy. Only their sport hadn't changed. Yorga fingered ebony gilt beads woven into a lock of his mud-brown hair, tavern shield beads, marking him as a hired guardsman to the alehouse. At his side, Bargo, the one still with his tongue, barked, "Goodly Master Rhine, don't take to punt scabbards crawling into his tavern a-beggin'." Tyler, his eyes narrowed, kept his post in the street, knowing better than to protest his innocence. He'd come to the tavern with 2 brass pinches, plenty for a pint. But it seemed he had chosen the wrong tavern. He knew better than to risk the establishments of the high city. This wasn't his place. Yet sometimes he forgot himself. Sometimes he simply sought some memory of a different life. He shut out such thoughts and crouched on the cobbles as a warm black rain misted from the dark skies. It was not the pleasant, cleansing downpour of a true storm, but more of a fog that trapped the day's heat and held it to the islands. Still, it wasn't the weather that pebbled Tyler's brow with sweat and made his ragged clothes suddenly seem too tight. Yorga balled up a fist and a garbled sound flowered from his scarred throat. Laughter. The pair of eye-men strode out from under the creaking sign of the wooden frog. Tyler was to be their amusement this night. Again, we're repeating ourselves at the end after already establishing that these guys are looking for a fight, and it's Tyler that they picked. We don't need to have this danced around anymore. You've already flat out said that they're wanting to fight him and beat the shit out of him. Why repeat that? But okay, whatever. Yorga came first. Oh, for some reason we have this little diamond thing. Like they just stood there for 30 minutes to an hour or for a length of time before anybody did anything. I don't know why we had to imply a time skip. Yorga came first, all fist and muscle, little finesse. I don't know why that needed its own fragment sentence, but okay. But skill was not needed against Tyler. At least not any longer. Oh, skill. I got confused. But skill was not needed against Tyler, at least not any longer. Once a Shadow Knight, Tyler previously could have taken both with hardly a wind. But the graces had been stripped from him along with rank and title. Additionally, the empty vessel left behind had been broken by a half-decade spent in the slave rings of Tyrick. His sword arm was a calloused club, numb from the elbow down. His legs had fared no better. Had fared no better? There should be an I there. Had fared no better. One knee was a knot of locked bone from an old hammer blow, the other slow and painful. Even his back was crooked, tightened by scars from the whip. He was no knight, not any longer. Yet his shadow master at Tashidan had taught him not to depend on the graces. A cuff usually accompanied his instructor's gruff words. A cuff? A cuff? I don't know what that means. Why are you using such weird-ass words? Remember, the deadliest grace comes not from a god, but from the heart and mind of a cornered man. It seemed a small lesson compared to the size of the combatants here. The hulking Yorga, bare-chested and sweating of ale, I guess the heavy drinker, outweighed Tyler by half. When we're done with you in the streets, the eye man warned, roughly grabbing his crotch, we're going to finish you in the alley. We always wanted to bugger a Shadow Knight. Okay, first of all, remember how I said the author was American? There's a lot of English slang in here. And I'm not sure he knows what he's talking about, so anybody who is actually in England, let me know. However, I will give this guy points for putting in the fact that these are two dudes who are clearly douchebags that are going to rape him. However, keep in mind that these are two douchebags who clearly want to rape him after they're done beating him up for something that comes up later. Tyler narrowed one eye. Finally, it was clear why these two had chosen to harangue him. It wasn't his shabby attire, nor even his broken form. It had been the stripes tattooed on the sides of his face, running in jagged lines from the outer corner of each eye to ear, heralding his former rank, forever marking him. 3 stripes, 1 for page, 1 for squire, 1 for vowed knight. What he had once borne with pride was now a mark of disgrace, a fallen knight. He kept the stripes hidden as much as possible, letting his black hair grow long and ragged, hanging over his storm-gray eyes. He kept his head bowed away from the sight of others. Still, anger burned deep behind his ribs, a fire that never dampened. Yeah, I said that right, dampened. Though it might smolder to embers, it was always there, always ready to flare. Yorga lunged an arm at him, meaning to grab a fistful of hair. A mistake. Skylar rocked out of the way, pivoting on his clubbed arm. He lashed out with the other, swiftly bringing his elbow around to strike the bridge of Yorga's nose as he leaned down, bone crushed. Tyler didn't feel it, but he heard it. Along with the howl that followed, It wasn't a cry of pain so much as outrage. Yorga lurched backward, blood spraying from both nostrils. Bargo roared, coming around his partner's side. Tyler rolled to his scarred back, kicking out with his legs. He knew where to strike. The heels of his boots smashed into the larger man's knees. Bargo's legs flew out from under him. He toppled forward, toward Tyler, arms outstretched, face a mask of rage, spill flying. Tyler, still on his back on the cobbles, rolled to the side, wrapping himself in his tattered cloak. Bargo crashed to the stones beside him, landing as Tyler had a moment before face first. But the slave fighters knew how to work together. Yorga's fingers clamped onto Tyler's ankle, with blood flecking from his snarled lips. Yorga hauled Tyler toward him. As a squire, Tyler had once fallen off his horse, tangled a boot in the stallion's snurrup, and had been dragged behind the beast. Yorga was stronger. With a grunt, Tyler flipped from his back to his stomach. The Eye Man had a grip on his mangled leg, the one with the frozen knee. It was like holding a bent shepherd's crook. You mean staff? Like the curve of the staff? The twisting forced Yorga to loosen his grip, lest his own wrists be broken. Partially free, Tyler... Okay, I just want to say something. It mentions that this Yorga dude is stronger. So, but what does that have to do when in the next paragraph he manages to flip on his stomach and move his leg, which the knee doesn't really work anymore, manages to force the guy to let him go, because if he doesn't, he'll probably break his wrist. So what does it matter that this Yorga guy was stronger? What does it matter that the horse was even when he fell off a horse? What does that matter? It doesn't. It doesn't matter. There's no point to that, because the next paragraph, we didn't need to even know that. We could have just jumped to this next paragraph. Like, really? Partially free, Tyler slammed his boot heels together, catching 3 of Yoga's fingers between them. Yorga half lifted Tyler and tossed him away. I thought you said he let go of him, otherwise he would have broke his wrist. The reason it was like holding the twisting horse Yorga to loosen his grip but not let go. Okay. Catching 3 of Yorga's fingers between them. Yorga half lifted Tyler and tossed him away. He rolled on a shoulder and allowed the momentum to put distance between himself and his attackers. He stopped in a half crouch, back to his enemies, glancing over his shoulder. He ached everywhere, his small reserves of strength ebbing. Yorga helped up Borgo. Fire burned in both men's eyes. Tyler had caught them by surprise. That was over. Together the Eye Men approached, stepping to either side to flank him. Hold! The voice froze them all. It came from farther up the street. Borgo and Yorga parted to reveal a single figure in a black surcoat, trimmed in silver, with a matching cloak, standing still. No chain, no armor, no shield. Only a sheathed sword hung at his waist. The black diamond on the hilt's crumple glowed with its own light. That was all the protection needed here. The figure had been blessed in grace, a shadow knight. The same light from the diamond shone in the eyes of the warrior. Tyler could not match that gaze. He turned askance. A wind caught the edge of the knight's cloak, willowing it out. Maybe it was a trick of the moonlight, but as the cloak swept across the knight's form, darkness consumed the figure, vanishing him halfway. Tyler knew it was not a trick of the light. For some reason we have ellipses there, but a blessing of shadow, the grace of such nights, to move unseen, to shrink into darkness and away. At night there was no greater foe. Bargo and Yorga knew this and bowed out of the way, heads lowered, backs bent. Yorga dropped to a knee as the knight stepped past him. "What is the mishap here?" the knight asked, his heavy gaze settling on Tyler. Rather than looking up, Tyler maintained a focus on the knight's boots. There was much to tell from a man's boots. Calfskin and molar horn. Fine-tooled leathers from the greater coast, worn well at the arch from riding hundreds of reaches in the stirrup. Since none of the Simmering Isles were more than 5 reaches across, the knight must be an outsider to this sea-locked realm. Perhaps a blessed courier from another god realm, or perhaps a new conscript called in service to the god here, Marin of the Simmering Isles. Either way, he's new to his cloak, Tyler concluded, or he wouldn't scuff his boots on such a petty street brawl. Bargo finally coughed loose his tongue. This scabbard were a beggin' in goodly Master Ryan's tavern house. We were bending his arm a bit to send him back down to punt." "Is that so?" the knight asked. Tyler heard the wry amusement in the other's tone. "From my vantage, I'd say he was the one doing the bending," Bargo blustered. The boots Tyler had been setting stepped closer. "Your name's, Sura?" "Yeah, not just Sir, it's Sura." Tyler remained silent. He didn't bother to look up. There was no need. The knight's features would be hidden behind a wrap of masculine, a face cloth cut from the same blessed material as the knight's cloak. All that was ever seen of the knight's face were the eyes and the triple stripes that blended into the masculine. "Is what they claim true?" the knight continued. "You are aware, Sura, that begging for coin is not allowed after sunset." As answer, Tyler reached into his pockets and tossed a pair of brass pinches on the cobbles before the knight's toes. "Ah, so it seems the scuff here has a coin or two. Sarah, perhaps your pinches are better spent in a tavern of the lower city." A toe nudged the bits of brass back towards Tyler. Such rare kindness earned a curious glance towards his benefactor. The knight was tall and lithe, a willow switched in a cloak. His face was indeed wrapped in masculine. Eyes glowed at him. Tyler saw them pinch in surprise. Pinch in surprise? Shouldn't they widen in surprise? A step was taken back. "He's a stripped knight," Bargo said. "A shitting vow-breaker." Tyler pocketed his coin and gained his feet. He stared the knight up and down, anger burning away shame. He read the disgust in the other's stance. He met the other's gaze fully for the first time. "Fear not, disgrace is not contagious, sir. S.E.R. He turned swiftly away, but not swiftly enough. "Sir Knock. S.E.R. Knock. ... The knight spoke his name with a raw shock. "Tyler Sir de Knock." Tyler's step faltered 1,000 reaches from his homelands, and he still could not escape his cursed name. "It is you, sir, is it not?" Tyler kept his back to him. "You are mistaken, Sir Knight. Curse my blessed eyes if I am. Boots scuffed closer. Face me. Tyler knew better than to disobey a Shadow Knight. He turned. Beyond the knight's shoulder, he spotted Barga and Yorga slinking back to the wooden frog, happy to escape the knight's attention. They knew their game had ended, but Bargo stopped at the threshold. He wiped blood and snot from his lips and cast a murderous stare towards Tyler, a promise of pain to come, a debt he meant to collect. Then the brawlers pushed back into the tavern. Tyler's attention focused back to the fellow before him. As I was saying, you mistake me for someone else, sir. As rebuttal, the knight reached to clasp at his throat. A shadowy waft of masculine fluttered free. Tyler instinctively glanced down. Only a knight was allowed to see another knight's features. Face me, sir. Command lay thick on the other's tongue. Tyler trembled and obeyed. He found the familiar countenance framed within the cloak's hood. Tyler knew those features: high cheekbones, white blonde hair, amber eyes. The young knight was all sunlight and autumn fields. In contrast to Tyler's stormy and dark countenance, time sailed backward. Tyler recognized the peach-faced boy behind the bearded man who stood before him now. Pyrrell. I guess it's Pyrrell. The last time he had seen this face, there had been only 2 stripes. Pyrrell had been one of his 3 squired lads back in Teshijan, under his tutelage before he glanced away, his heart aching. The Shadow Knight dropped to one knee before him. Sir Nock. No, Tyler refused. No longer Sir Nock. It's simply D. Nock. Never. To me you will always be held as Sir. Tyler twisted and stumbled away. Get off your knees, Pyrrell. You shame yourself and your cloak. It seems even in this small task I have failed the order, training you so poorly for your station. He continued down the street. A scuffle sounded behind him as his former squire gained his feet and fled abreast of him. All that I am I owe to you. The words cut like poisoned daggers. Tyler hurried on, knowing he could never flee a blessed night, or perhaps he could escape his own memories. Pyrrell kept beside him. I would speak to you, sir. Much has changed back in Tashijan. If you will meet with me on the morrow. Tyler stopped and swung toward Pyrrell. His chest heaved on swells of shame and misery. Damn your eyes! Look at me, Pyrrell. He held up his crooked arm. The knight you knew is gone, long buried. I'm a scabber out of punt. Leave me to my hole and seek me out no more. His outburst thrust the other back a half step. In the knight's face he saw the boy again, wounded and at a loss for response. The young man stared up at the lesser moon's glow. I must be away, he mumbled apologetically, fixing his mescaline back in place, then met Tyler's eye firmly, a knight again. Whether it bring you pain or humiliation, I would still speak with you. Leave me be, Pyrrell. He begged with all his heart. If you ever loved me, leave me be. For now. Only for now. He swung his cloak and back into shadow, blending away. Only a pair of eyes glowed back at Tyler. A dread and perilous time is upon us, upon all of us. Then Pyrrell was gone, moving with the speed born of grace. Tyler stood a moment longer. His fingers clutched the pair of brass pinches in his pocket. Would that he had a silver yoke to drown away his night. But he doubted that even a pouch of gold marches would wash his pain away. He let the pinches slip between his fingers into his pocket as he continued down the street. He skirted round the darkest alleys of Hunt, aiming round about for the docklands and his lone bed. On the morrow, he would seek a boat to another island. He did not want to be known or remembered. He would lose himself again, sinking into the solace that came with anonymity. I so butchered that word. Still, Peril's words stayed with Tyler as he hobbled along. A dead A dread and perilous time is upon us all. A streak of dark humor cut through his pain and shame. A dread and perilous time. That fairly summed up his state of affairs since he was stripped 5 years ago. How was any of this new tiding? With a shake of his head, he shut out such thoughts. It was none of his concern. As the night wore thin, Tyler walked from the streets lined in cobble to those simply worn from the natural sandy rock. Here the houses were shuttered and dark, hiding their faces. Off to his left, the alleys and the narrows of Punt echoed with cries, shouts, and sounds to which it was best to be deaf, but one could not escape Punt's smells. Our hero, ladies and gentlemen. The most horrible thing in the world is smell. Terrible smells. Not the fact that people are getting murdered or raped, but the smells that come with living in a city. Goody. It shat and sweated and pissed like a living creature, ripe with corruption, pestilence, and decay. Lovely. One never developed a nose for it. It was too changeable, day by day, by season, by storm, by fair weather. Gee, thanks for the single paragraph it took to tell me that. Tyler kept his shoulders hunched, sulking through pockets of gloom. One learned the value of being inconspicuous in the lower city. He crept along shadows. Though now graceless, he was not without skill at moving unseen. For those who might not know, I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but there's a thing, at least in Christianity, I don't know about other religions, in which they call the grace of God. When you have, having grace of God is really good and wonderful. So, of course, they're using that to refer to, that's what the grace or graceless means here. Thought I would mention that. It's kind of hard to explain what that means, at least in terms of real life religion. But you could probably find better explanations than I could possibly give on the internet, or actually go to a church and ask a priest or, the preacher or whatever. Just don't be a dick. If you don't believe, just don't be a dick. Just be like, hey, I was wondering about this. And I didn't want to Google it. I thought maybe I'd get a better answer if I came and asked somebody who actually believed. But anyway, where was I? Though now graceless, he was not without skill at moving unseen. He rounded past Gillian Square with its empty gallows and cut through Chantry Row. I gotta scratch my nose. With its tanners and dye works. Still, he could not fully escape Punt's gaze. It leered at him as he crawled home. It screamed and laughed and watched him from 100 dark windows. Yeah, I was reading that right. He hurried over Lumberry Bridge as its stones spanned the stagnant canal that drained the upper city, carrying away its refuse and bile. Thanks for telling us that. I really, really needed this focus on shit and piss. Beyond the bridge, the canal dumped into Lower Punt, the island's chamber pot. Past Lumberry, Tyler had his trickiest traverse. Here the boundary between Lower Punt and the more stable dockyards blurred. Taverns and winch works occupied every corner. Dark alleys crisscrossed blindly. Tyler entered the gloom, and while shadows had always been his home, there was no safety. The very air was heavy and thick, moving sluggishly. A fetid exhalation from Hunt. It was common. My goodness, I am tripping over words. It was a common lay for thieves seeking a quick slice and run, or hard-picked roughers looking for a bit of alley rutting, willing or not. Really? Neither was much threat to Tyler. He seldom carried enough coin to be worth the effort, and his bent, scarred form hardly fired anyone's loins. We are 12 pages in. This is our second reference to raping the main male character. No actual rape has occurred in regards to our main male character, but it's been referenced twice. So he hurried through these last alleys, already picturing his straw-filled bed. But as he rounded the darkest patch, entering a small square of derelict buildings, his feet suddenly stopped as surely as if he had run into a wall. A waft of scent had almost dropped him to his knees. Not foul, but the sweetest bouquet, lavenders and honey bloom, bright against the darkness. It was silk and a child's laugh. What? What? Why don't you just say it was like really fucking pleasant? What? Unnecessary elaboration. We're trying too hard. Tyler stood, planted on the sandy stone of the square. How could he walk away? He doubted he could even be forced away. Tears welled in his eyes. The darkness scintillated with the sweet water scent. All he could do was search for its source. What beauty could bloom in such sight? Then a scream shattered the night, startling him back into the dangers that lay in the shadows of Punt. It was a man who cried out, and Tyler had never heard such terror, not in all his years. There followed the bright sound of sword on stone, shouts accompanied in chorus, panicked, close, the neighboring alley, footfalls echoed, running away. No, toward him. Tensing, Tyler twisted round. He was momentarily unsure where to flee. Then a figure unfolded from the darkness before him. A slivered sword. A slivered? Silvered? I'm gonna say that's supposed to be silvered. I think that's silvered. Yeah, me understanding words bad. A silvered sword held aloft in his hand split his dark form like lightning. Above the blade, eyes matched the shine. A shadow knight. Instinctively, Tyler knew it was not peril. The form was too broad of shoulder. The man dropped to his knees, not in supplication as peril had moments ago, but in prostration. Tyler stepped toward him, a hand raising in aid, but he was too late. As the knight's body struck the street, his head rolled impossibly from his shoulders, bouncing obscenely to Tyler's toes. Slain. Ellipses. Gasping, Tyler stumbled away. Other bits of darkness fell out of the shadows. More knights, wrapped in masculine and cloak, appeared. They fared no better than the first, seeming to come apart at the seams. Limbs dropped away, bloodless but dead. Innards burst, pouring in tortuous loops from bellies. One knight collapsed in on himself as if his bones had suddenly jellied. Horrified, Tyler fell back. What deadly grace was at work here? Does that really have to be the grace of a god? Who knows? He found his back pressed to the mortared stone of a burned-out structure. He huddled into a doorway's alcove, seeking refuge inside, but the entrance was boarded tight. Trapped, his eyes widened, seeking any clue, any answer to the slaughter. Something shared the shadows with the nights, but what? Across the alley, a fog of light swelled between. Oh my God, I can't talk. Across the alley, a fog of light swelled between two soot-painted buildings. A glowing vessel flew into the square. It was a mechanical fluorescent, an open carriage held aloft by a pair of blurred wings. It bore a lone woman crouched on the single seat. Other knights flanked the carriage and trailed it. But one after another they fell afflicted. Yeah, I guess I'd be afflicted. But one after another they fell afflicted like the others until there were none. Alone and unguarded, the carriage canted, struck the cobbles, and spilled over. Broken wings shattered against stone. The passenger, a wisp of a woman, flew free of the wreckage and landed spryly. She twirled in the center of the shimmering mist, a dance of panic and wildness. Tyler was again struck by a swell of sweet water scents, stretching from some distant spring, but now it had a touch of winter's frost too. Fear. Tyler knew the woman was the very bloom of this bouquet. She was also the source of a glow, a living lamp. The cold sheen of terror on her skin cast its own light. She must be richly blessed in graces to shine with such power, perhaps a noblewoman, or someone of an even higher station. Her dress was snowy. Her dress was snowy finery and lace. Ellipses. Her hair loose to the shoulder, as dark as her skin was pale. Somewhere deep inside, he knew he should go to her aid, but he remained in place. He was no longer a knight, but a broken man. Shame burned as bright as his fear. The woman fled to the center of the dark square, still dancing warily, eyes flashing with glowing tears. She was indeed powerfully blessed, rich in humoral graces. The blessing of the gods flowed from her every pore, misting from her body as she whirled. But with whom was she dancing? The answer was not long in coming. Darkness took form at the edge of her glow, coalescing out of the outer shadow. It stood upright like a man, but was no man. It was scale and snake and shattered teeth. A crest trailed from the crown to a whipping tail. As it approached, a mist of gloom streamed from its skin, a contrary grace to the bright glow of the lone woman. She faced her enemy, stopping her dance. "You will not win," she whispered. As answer, a hiss of fire licked from its burned lips, and there were no words, but a sound accompanied the flame, distant, yet still reaching clearly to Tyler in his hiding place. It pierced and ate at his will. His legs shook. He knew it to be a voice, but no throat could utter such a noise. It was not a sound that belonged anywhere among the 9 lands, nor anywhere across all of Myrilla. It was a keening wail, cracking with my good God. Stop over-describing shit. Like, really? Like, get to the point. Why are you so wordy? Did you, like, fuck up your word count or something? Did you not come up with anything better than so many words? It was a keening wail, crackling with lightning, laced with the scurry of dark things under the ground. Tyler covered his ears, but it did not help. The woman listened. Her only response was a paling of her snowy skin. Bones showed through. Her eyes dimmed. She uttered one word. No. Really? Really? You just heard some dark, evil shadow creature thing, like, creep everybody the fuck out. And instead of going, no! Your response is, no. Not, no! Your response is, no. What is wrong with you? Your response wouldn't be just, no. I would be freaking out. There is a black scaly monster thingy in front of me that is making a sound nothing natural can make. My response would not just be a casual, no. Then the beast lashed out, moving faster than the eye could follow. Darkness crested like a wave over the bright well of grace that shielded the woman. Lightning flashed across the darkness, lacing out and striking the woman. She fell back, arms outstretched, momentarily impaled between her breasts by the stroke of brightness. It was not lightning, Tyler realized, but something with substance. Ellipses, yet at the same time, not completely of this world. Yes, we have established this. Pierced through the chest, the woman cried out, a wail of a songbird, sharp and aching. Wouldn't it be more like the wail of a mourning dove, then? Whatever. I'm just like the wail of a songbird. If she's crying out, it wouldn't sound anything like a songbird. It would sound like she's screaming, and it would be horrific because her chest just got ripped open. The beast pursued, leaping. Darkness swallowed the woman away, rolling over her. Both vanished in the streaming gloom of the creature's shadow. Tyler held himself clenched. You could... What? Just say he couldn't move. He was scared stiff. He was unable to move. There are better ways to explain that he could not move. He could do nothing but watch what was happening. In fact, just say that. Cliched? Yes. Overused? Yes. Still gets the point across better than what you just wrote? Yes. Then, like storm clouds rolled away by the swift winds, the blackness swirled outward, becoming a tempest trapped between stone walls. It struck all around, tearing at mortar, glass shattered. Glass shattered is not a sentence. Tyler clutched the walls of his alcove, nails digging for purchase. He fought to hold himself in place, but he also felt a tug on all that held his spirit in place. His sight was taken from him, or perhaps it was the world that had been stolen away. He teetered on the edge of an abyss, his skin both burned and iced. His heart stopped beating in his chest. He knew his death. Then he was let go. He fell back against the boarded up door. Before him in the square, darkness rolled into a great vortex as if draining away down some unseen well. The darkness whirled, growing smaller, then it swept down and away. Across the ravaged square, the beast was nowhere to be seen. All that was left was the woman's form sprawled in the center of the square. Her limbs still glowed, only weaker now. Rivers of brightness ran and pulled out from her form. Blood, shining with the richness of powerful graces, flowed from her. She did not move. Dead. Tyler stumbled from the alcove. He sensed in his bones that whatever had entered the punt had vanished away. Still he dare approach no closer. He headed away, past the bodies of slain sprawled in their blessed cloaks. The night seemed like ghosts, blending with the shadows. Though the wearers were dead, the cloth still maintained its grace, working to hide its owner even in death. As Tyler skirted the square, the scent of flower petals and warm sun swelled around him. He turned, knowing the source. The pale, misty beauty remained unmoving on the stone. From this angle he spotted the black hole pierced through her chest, as wide as a fist, blackened and whisked with curls of smoke. So again, ladies and gentlemen, our hero just stands there and lets somebody die. Granted, he didn't know what to do, and he's not a knight anymore, so I can forgive him on that, to that extent. But he already says he knows that whatever that was has left. There is no longer any danger for him to approach this woman and see if she's okay or not. Or to go find a guard or something and alert them to the fact something horrible just happened. Instead, he's just going to leave. He sensed it was down that hole that the darkness had vanished away, the well through which the enemy had escaped. Through the forces that worked here had nothing to do with the fallen knight, nor a broken man. He found his feet walking him toward the woman. Thank God a piece of you has some common sense. As he approached, he attempted to keep his feet from her glowing blood. Dude, it does not matter if her blood is glowing. It does not fucking matter. You just go to her and stop being a dick. But there was too much. Oh, boo-hoo! Somebody is dying out. Somebody's bleeding out in front of me. And I don't want to get the icky stuff on me, but now I can't help it because there's so much blood. It'll never come out. He moved into her light, careful of the slick stone. She surely was a noble woman of high stature. It was seldom someone was blessed with such a degree of grace. Perhaps she was even one of the eight hand servants to Mirren, the god made flesh of these islands. Such servants dwelled in the god's constellation, harvesting and performing the humors from the god they served. Tyler eyed the castellation blazing atop the isle's highest point, Summer Mount, the seat of Mirren. If he was right, if the last had indeed been in service of this realm's god, he pitied the hand behind this attack. A god's vengeance knew no pity. He reached the woman's side. He stared down into the wan beauty brought low here. She was young, no more than 18. Her face glowed with a fading brilliance gone to embers. That was strange. Anyway. Sounded like somebody was like, hello. She was young, no more than 18. Her face glowed with a fading brilliance, gone to embers. The blank eyes, as blue as the seas, stared skyward. Then those same eyes twitched in his direction, seeing him. Tyler clenched back a step in shock. He clenched. Why don't you say he tensed and took a step back in shock? She did indeed still live, but surely not for long. Well, Mimi, you should try to stop her from bleeding to death. Child, he whispered, not knowing what words he could offer at this last moment. He crouched, soaking his pant leg in blood. As the dampness reached his skin, he realized his mistake. The blood burned his flesh, not like fire, but like spiced wine on the tongue, as much pleasure as pain. It was a burn to which he was well familiar. Crying out, he fell backward. Fingers latched onto his wrist, holding him, squeezing like the iron manacles that had bound him for 5 years. He escaped in horror. The woman was not dead. Then again, how could she be? She was not a woman at all. Tyler knew who lay before him now, who clutched him. It was not a handmaiden. It was Marin herself, the immortal god of the Simmering Isle. Fingers squeezed and drew him closer. The other arm rose and reached toward him. The palm was bloody. Tyler had neither the strength nor the will to fight. The reaching palm struck his chest as if to push him away, while the clutching fingers pulled at him. The blood on the outstretched hand blazed through both the rough-spun cotton of his shirt and the soft linen of his underclothes. It touched the flesh over his heart. This was no spiced wine. He smelled the smolder of seared skin. The pain was excruciating, but at the same time he never wanted it to end. It didn't. The god at his feet pushed deeper, stretching for his heart as it fluttered, a panicked bird in a bony cage. He gasped out fire as burning fingers entered his chest. The stone of the square vanished from his eyes, snuffed away like a pinched candle. The small sounds of the night blew out. The hard grind of stone fell away under his legs. Only now did he understand the lack of substance behind reality, yet sensations remained. A palm pushing at his chest, a hand dragging him down by the wrist. He spun in these contrasts, but here, where there was no substance, both were possible. He felt himself shoved up into a brilliance that blinded, while dragged down into a darkness that was somehow just as bright. Where a moment ago he had stood at the edge of the bottomless abyss, now he hung over the same. But as he spun, he recognized his mistake. There was not one abyss, but two, one above and one below. One B.O., just like Caleb, to fuck up words. Both stared at him as he hovered between, his bones burning like a torch. This was more than death. I am undone, he thought, knowing it to be true. Then a wash of coolness drenched his form, drowning him, driving him back to the slaughter of the square, back into his own body. He struck it like he had the broken cobble outside the wooden frog, hard and abrupt. Sensations filled him again, but the palm of his chest no longer burned. From the god's hand a chilled wash spread out and through him. He knew this sensation too. In a different life, he had bent a knee to the god Jessup of Oldenbrook. Then, too, he had been filled with grace, and like Marin, Jessup had borne the aspect of water. To many, this aspect was the weakest of the four. Most of his fellow knights had sought out gods of fire, loam, or air, but not Tyler. He had been born as his mother drowned aboard the sinking shuttlecraft off the greater coast. Water was his home as much as shadow. So he knew what filled him now. No, he gasped. Grace flowed into him, drowned him. 100-fold richer than when Jessup had ceremoniously blessed him. He didn't deserve this honor. He could not face it, but he also could not escape it. Grace swelled in him, stretching him. No, too much. His back arched. He remembered his birth, shoved brutally and lovingly out of the warmth of his mother's womb and into the cold seas of Morelia. What? Now we're just getting absurd because we're trying to do our word count again. Oh my god, what possessed you to write this garbage? This is so dumb. Like, pointless even. Then, too, he had breathed water, momentarily one with the sea, until salt burned and lungs fought to cry. He would have died had not the next of what? He would have died had not the net of a lobsterman hauled him from the waves. But who will save me now? Water surged through him. He could not breathe. He craned, stretching for air. Too much. Something gave way deep inside him. The swell of water sprouted up and drained down, spewing from him in racking spasms. He felt part of himself given away with it, released, stolen, shared, and at the same time something entered, swimming up the flowing channel and into his chest, settling there, coiling there. Then the water finally emptied from the broken vessel that was his body. Tyler collapsed in on himself, spent and drained. The momentary blessing was gone. The hand on his chest fell away. His wrist was released. He stared down again into Marin's face. Her soft skin no longer glowed, but her eyes still stared at him as dawn finally broke over the island. Taking the edge off the gloom, Marin would recover. Like all the gods, she was immortal, undying, eternal. Her lips moved, but no words were spoken. He thought he had read the word pity on those perfect lips, but maybe it was just something in her eyes. What did she mean? Lie still, he urged, leaning closer. Help will come. A small movement, a tiny shake of her head, and a sigh. Her lips parted again. He cocked his head, bringing his ear closer. Her breath was cherry blossoms on a still lake. Ribbon scar, she whispered. It was not a figment of thought, but a simple command. Tyler's brow pinched at the strange word. Ribbon scar? He faced her, a question on his lips. What? Then he saw the impossible before him. It took all his breath from him. Marin lay as she had a moment before, but now all light faded from her. Not just the glow of her graces, but all that separated the living from the dead. Her eyes still open, went empty and blind. Her lips remained parted with her last word, but no breath escaped. Her lips remained parted with her last word, but no breath escaped them. Both as Shadow Knight and as a slave, he had come to know death. But here it was not possible. Gods do not die. A strident burst of horns startled him, driving him to his feet. He twisted around to find a dark shadow sweeping at him with the swiftness of a black gale. He fell back, fearing the beast had returned, but glowing eyes stared down at him. Shape took form, a familiar one. The cloak billowed out, then settled to narrow shoulders. Peril! Tyler said, relieved that his former squire had not been a part of the slaughter here. In the distance, the horn blared again. Shouts now could be heard. The Castellan guards were closing in. The young knight took in the scene. What have you done? He asked in a rush. Tyler frowned at such a strange question. What do you mean? Tyler glanced down at himself. He was covered in blood, Marin's blood. In the center of his chest, a perfect palm print had been burned through his shirt and linens. The skin beneath was as black as the scorched edges of his clothing. He touched the flesh, no blistering, just a black stain. He was marked. Tyler lifted an arm. You can't think I saw you earlier. And I you, so? Peril eyed him from head to toe. Look at yourself. Why? Further words died as he finally understood. Perhaps he had been too numb by the events, or perhaps it was like a pair of well-broken boots, easy to forget once donned. Either way, he finally noted the straight hold of his back, the breadth of his shoulders, the strength in his arms and legs. You're healed. Before he could react, Castilian guards pounded into the square, bearing pikes and long swords. Cries arose as the bloody sight struck them. Many fell immediately to their knees. The stronger fanned out to shield the square and attend to the night's victims. A full complement surrounded Marine, driving Tyler away at the point of a blade. Do not say a word, Peril hissed in his ear, staying at his side. Tyler stared at the... My goodness. Do not say a word, Peril hissed in his ear, staying at his side. Tyler stared at the many drawn weapons and obeyed. A fresh cry erupted from the crowd around the fallen god. She's dead, one man shouted. Another, bearing the oak sprig of a healer, stumbled free of the group. His face had drained of all color, his eyes bright with shock. Her heart is gone, ripped away. All around, guards stared hard at Tyler, many weeping, others swearing. He knew how he must look, the lone survivor covered in Marin's blood. Her palm print burned into his chest as if she had attempted to thrust him away. And on top of it all, he was healed, cured, made new again. A cadre? I don't know that word. A-C-A-D-R-E of castle guards approached, with swords drawn, murder in their every step. Peril stepped before Tyler, facing the men. Under the edict of the order, this man is arrested under my name. Shouts met his words, angry. Peril yelled to be heard. He will not be harmed until the matter here is attended, and the truth be known. The guard stopped, hesitant. Swords remained drawn. Their captain took another step forward and spat in Tyler's direction. He uttered one word, both curse and accusation. Godslayer.